Hello and welcome to the Practice Marketing Podcast, highlighting successful strategies from North America's fastest growing clinics and experts so you can learn from their wins and power your practice growth. Hi, I'm your host, Neil Triggett, CEO of Practice Promotions, and today we're going to have a focus on learning from a PT intern to a multi-location CEO here with Adam Schoenberg. Adam started out as a PT intern at Atlas Physical Therapy and Sports Medicine in Saint Augustine, Florida. But over the past 24 years, he's worked his way up from intern to a physical therapist to the CEO now of and owner of Atlas, which is now a 4-location physical therapy practice, and also Torque Performance. So he's been involved in all facets of the business, from patient care to management to ownership. And today he'll share about his journey and what he's learned from that with leadership, private practice growth, and ownership. So Adam, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Neil.
Awesome. So let's dive in. Let's chat. So could you give me just a brief overview of your journey from that intern to CEO?
Sure. Yeah. So 24 years, like you had commented on, the assignment of myself at Atlas was just a luck of the draw, out of the hat thing, which led to wife, children, and everything else. So it was a pretty remarkable decision there. But spring of 2001, started as an intern, actually for athletic training at Atlas Physical Therapy. Continued through graduation, rolled right into physical therapy school, which took me through the next couple of years there into 2004 when I graduated. Did a good enough job that they kept me on, and was privileged to have a job there, which I then assumed for the next 6 years. So for the next couple of years as a PT, and then until 2012 in more of a managerial role with clinic manager and just a couple of different roles in that realm, but not an overseeing type of role there. So in 2012, felt like there was a little bit of a stagnation. And so, like all good people do, I decided to try some exciting things that have nothing to do with PT, and actually got into day trading a little bit. No success there whatsoever. There's not even worth commenting on or going down the road, but it did. In order to make ends meet, I went and worked for a physician-owned private practice, or a physical therapy practice, which kind of sent me to the end of the spectrum. From there, I came back to Atlas and presented a role for myself to my previous boss, and he graciously accepted it. Came back, and in that same year, took on a more company-wide managerial role, led to a minority ownership stake in the business, and that is where things stayed until 2020. And as we all know, that was an exciting year for all kinds of wonderful reasons, right? With COVID and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, for a plethora of reasons, it got to the point where my business partner decided he was going to retire. I decided it was a good time to kind of put my money where my mouth was and purchase the rest of the practice. And that's where we've been. So we've been as full owners since then. Myself, I say we as in terms of my wife and family, because it's not an isolated task by any means. So and then also in 2020 was the year that Torque Sports Performance had grown, believe it or not, during a year of no gym activity and stuff, to the point where we acquired a standalone business or building for itself. So in that year, we ended up with 2 businesses, and here we are.
Wow, what a fascinating journey there. Yes, you've really seen it all, right? In terms of all the different
Yeah.
positions within the clinic there, and that's really interesting too. That building a sports performance within your your PT model, and then obviously it grew so successful that then you saw the need to transition it into its own thing, right? And build it out from there. So I'd love to learn more about that too. So as you evolved, right, in your career, what were some of the things that you had to change in terms of your mindset, going from first that intern to obviously being a physical therapist?
Right. Yeah. So intern to PT, time to grow up, right? Time to put on your big boy pants, big girl pants, yeah, and start living the real life, right? I think responsibility uh, is a primary shift, primary responsibility for your actions, obviously, but also the outcomes of patients. If we're going to talk about physical therapy specifically, there's no more clinical instructor. There's no more mom and dad on the personal side of things, right? Like you have to make things happen, and your actions have legitimate consequences at this point. Like you're making decisions for the livelihood and well-being of patients, and um, nobody's there checking your notes. In most cases, anyways, at least from a technical standpoint, nobody's checking your notes anymore. Nobody's checking your evaluations. Did you do this? Did you miss that? If you screw up, it's on you at this point. So that was the big one, I think, from intern to physical therapist.
Yeah, and like you said, it is time to grow up, right? Because you go from that,
Yeah,
kind of college lifestyle, right, to then having a lot more responsibility, from a professional standpoint for
100%.
other people. And like you said, people aren't really necessarily watching over your shoulder for things there. But I think one thing that I look at your journey too, and it brings me to a thought of in practice, we know that it is more of a fight for talent today, and we have to look at how are we developing talent from all kinds of avenues, and sometimes we're so busy in our practice in the moment, and let's say someone leaves, we're trying immediately to try and hire for that position, but we have to play the long game also. So there's sometimes we have to have the short game for recruiting and hiring, but what's your long game in your practice? And I think you're a perfect example of how someone who has an interest in physical therapy, that you have interns coming in from and developing those programs within, from schools and things like that. How can you help facilitate that, move someone through in their career, and bring that into your practice to help grow positions that you have in your practice? And then I'm interested to learn more as you were there as a physical therapist, and then over time you took a break and you came back, and then you became a director of operations. What changed in that aspect for you too, in terms of your mindset shift as you came back to be more of an operations director?
Yeah, I think it was good to go see the other end of the spectrum. Like I said, being in a whether it's physician owned or not, wasn't really didn't really matter, but it was busy, like 30 patients a day, me and a tech that did front desk duties type of busy. So I saw that. And so, coming back to what some may consider busy wasn't even close. Like you see those big wide spectrums there, so you can appreciate the middle ground a little bit better, I think. So in doing that, I came back with a mindset of what can we do better that we hadn't been doing because we were operating in some capacity as more of the mom and pop type thing, right? Like our mindset needed to shift. And I think me getting away and coming back allowed me to do that and presented in a case for myself, um, where I wanted to go, but I front loaded that with where can we take the company, and in turn
Mhm.
sort of meet my needs and goals and wishes along the way, which, to your point, now that I'm in the position I am in, how can we move the company forward while still respecting and keeping in mind a new grad or somebody who's been here 10 years? Like, what do they need to stay engaged? What do they need to stay interested in Atlas as their employer and as their career site while still making sure the company stays on track and grows and all of those types of things? So that's that was extremely, revealing for me, obviously. And then I think the biggest thing coming back was just because I'm back, just because I have a title, just because somebody said I'm in charge of stuff, you realize real quick it doesn't mean squat. Like you got to earn that from your team, right? And in doing
Yeah.
so takes time, it takes perseverance, and you better listen far more than you talk and direct if you want to accomplish that task.
Great advice there. Yeah, and sometimes even within our in our own teams, like someone who gets promoted up to be a director, or maybe they helped start up a new location. Just because they were respected as a physical therapist in the clinic doesn't mean that they're now respected in that operations role, right? They have to earn
Sure.
their respect with that too. And I think what I'm fascinated to learn about too is you mentioned how at Atlas you're looking at what are you doing to develop someone who's a new grad or someone who's been there for 10 years. So what are some of the things that you try to encourage or you're trying to help people with to maintain that interest, in their job, right, in their career?
Right. We have a unique, I say unique only in the small circle of folks that I talk to, my peer-to-peer groups and stuff like that in terms of where they're hiring from. So I say unique in that we have hired all of our previous 4 or 5 clinicians from our internship program. So they've been with us anywhere from 8 to 16 weeks. So as my old business partner used to say, the lipstick is off the pig, right? Like you get to know them, they know you, they've seen the good, the bad, and everything in between. So coming out of the gates, we have an advantage in that there should be there shouldn't be any surprises, at least in the front loaded part of their career, right? Um, we look to provide them with a situational or a situation in which they can flourish in both the types of patients that they're seeing, in terms of the team that they're going to be involved with, whether it be by location or specialty or niche or that sort of thing. However, we balance that on the business side with them understanding that there are numbers to be met, right? There are,
Mhm.
you have to see um, some of the Medicare patients before you get to see just all athletes all day, if that's one of my sports medicine based ones or something like that. Um, they understand the guardrails in between which we have to operate in order for the business to be successful and thus for them to have fun, so to speak, right? Enjoy coming to work, do all those types of things. Um, and outside of that, give them, as I talk with them, sort of a 12-month grace period. Don't worry about anything except just being a great clinician. Don't worry about, you know, some of the stresses of the business. I'll make sure the numbers and you're provided with your evaluations. I'll make sure that those types of things are taken care of. Just do what you do and let's get through this first year of just being a great clinician. And then from there, we sit down and we say, now what? What do you want to do? What is more important? What is most important? And with that, how do we build and develop them, their goals, their rocks around getting to those things to be met? And it may be professionally directed, right? It may be, I want to do nothing but high level athletes. Okay, how do we get there? Another one may be, hey, I want to have a kid with my wife and I want to have a kid in 12 months. How do we prepare for that? How do we make sure that you're financially stable, that everything's going to be good?
Mhm.
So, whatever their goals are, we try to make sure the business is working towards meeting them.
That's fantastic. And I love what you're doing there because in today's world, it's about retaining your team and developing your team. And I think what you're doing exceptionally well here is you're more purposeful with developing your team and your process from taking an intern. That's a great flow through a long-term strategy, right? For finding and developing top clinicians for your clinic, and you can mold and adapt that right mindset. And like you said, you can find out that person who is a better fit for what you're looking for. But then where you go from there, I love what you're really focusing on, which is developing them as a clinician and helping them understand the clinical side of things. But then also, I think sometimes where we don't do enough is helping our clinicians understand the business side of things too, right? And developing their understanding there. There's a lot to figure out from insurance, um, you know, using insurance and coding and all those kind of things that we're not really taught much of in school, right? And obviously the business aspects of the impact your actions make on cancellation rates and all kinds of things like that. So I really like the way that you're putting attention on the purposeful development of someone, And that's a great asset for you too in attracting people to you when you have those kind of mentoring programs within your practice, both for new grads and for seasoned PTs coming in.
Yeah,
And then
I agree.
for
And one point, sorry about
yeah, go
that.
ahead,
I was
Adam.
going to say one point to some of that was just going to be, I know a lot of students and interns ask about like, hey, what is your mentorship program or whatever? And I talk to a lot of other clinicians who have those types of programs, and they may work in certain environments. What I have found personally with the folks that I have is the rigid program. I don't like rigid programs. Like I like some guardrails, but I like to have the ability to help mentor them. But until they've been here for a good 6 to 12 months, like I don't think either one of us really know what they want yet. You think you
Yeah,
do, but you put this program in place only to get to the end of it and be like, yeah, I really don't care about that. I would rather go down this road. So that's why, there's enough structure there in the first 12 months to kind of get everybody to where we need to be. But then okay, now that you're not worried about your boards anymore and you're not worried about your first house and all, like get past all that stuff. Now, really, what do you want to do? Now let's set up a path.
awesome. And do you approach something similar with someone who's say a seasoned PT coming in, as far as like obviously what your expectations are, kind of setting a time frame for the their development with your unique aspects of your practice.
So right or wrong, I can't answer that because we've only hired the new folks for so long. I can't.
It's
The
working so
last
well. Yeah.
I mean, the last quote unquote seasoned PT we hired was somebody who had been out somewhere between 6 months and a year. We had talked to them. We didn't have a position at the time they came out, and as soon as a position opened, I called them. They came on. So um, that's as seasoned as we've gotten in the past,
Got it.
literally 7 years, I think.
Hmm.
But
Awesome. Yeah, so obviously you got something that's working well there from a development model, obviously from intern to new grad and developing them from there. So that's fantastic. And I've seen that more. We did a lot of that in our practice. I always remember that, and we still do that in practice promotions. We bring college interns in and develop them, and then get to cherry pick who you really like from that. So
mhm,
I think it is an important part of your business and your operations is talent development. And are you purposeful enough with that? And certainly, I do like new grads because they don't come with baggage most of the time, right? And you're able to, you know,
100%.
they don't have bad habits from previous, jobs, and you can mold them a little bit better in terms of what the right way of doing it. And I think what I liked about your story, your experience was that you did experience the opposite end of the spectrum where you're getting crushed with patient visits, um, and it's hard to operate at such a high pace. And I do think there's something very special about private practice owned PT clinics because technically don't really operate the way a lot of the corporate ones might run, with such high volume, such high numbers. So that is a way thing for us to attract talent to us, right? And so then you made this shift from that manager, director of operations into ownership, right, and CEO. So what did you have to change there in terms of a mindset going to that next level?
Assumption of risk with everything. There, whether it's the name on the lease, whether it's the name on the loan, like it's your name now, right? You can't walk away. If you say I hate this tomorrow and shut everything down, that's great. You've got, debt collectors coming for their payments on their leases and their loans and stuff. So I think it's a responsibility that is, sometimes we put that under the rug during the excitement of starting our business and getting everything going. And it's not until you hit some rough patches and you go to sleep at night that you realize you can't stop. Like you got to keep going, right? So that's number one. Number two, which I grew to appreciate quickly and have maintained this line of thinking, and I say it in lots of my meetings, is being responsible for other people um, is one of the greatest privileges you can have. It's obviously it can be a stressor in some capacity, but to be the sole provider, or to be helping assist to be the provider for 20 something employees, their husbands, wives, significant others, kids, whatever, is a great privilege. And again, I don't know that that's at the front of our minds when we're starting these businesses, during the excitement and all of that type of stuff. So those two things are big. And then the biggest change from where I was to becoming CEO is you have to know your numbers. They don't lie, and like I put down on paper many a times, numbers don't lie unless they're wrong. And in which case you go down a very dark hole very quickly. So I've just met too many over the years who don't know their numbers. And I think it's such a from a tactical standpoint, it's such a fundamental thing that I think a lot of folks lie to themselves and say they know their numbers or say they're doing well. And at the end of the day, if you can dial it down to some standardized assessment of all the practices, I think there's a lot more than folks think that are not doing as well as they think they are.
Yeah, that's a great observation, and I do think that's one of the cores to scaling your business. So you need to know numbers to be a successful single location, but as you add more locations, more people, there's complexity increases. You've got to make decisions, and you got to have the people working for you to make those decisions too, based off of the metrics. So that's great feedback to hear that from you in terms of like how you really transition to look at the numbers a lot more for your clinic to make those data driven decisions, right?
Agreed. And I think it's important as far as I don't think, again, coming back to, I don't think folks think in the now, how am I going to get out of this in 5 or 10 years? And I would make an argument that you can probably be two, three, four clinics big and your numbers are okay. And there's some gray area and you know that whatever you're doing is enough to get by. But when the person comes in to eventually hopefully buy your practice and they tell you it's worth X and you think it's worth 5 times that, it's going to be a swift kick. And how are you going to get out? So not preparing with the end in mind in terms of knowing those numbers is I think a shortcoming of a lot of us as owners.
Yeah, I mean that's the number one thing we're doing in our business, right? Is our practice should give us opportunity, should provide for the livelihood that we want, right? And for the people that we serve. But at the end of the day, it's an asset that you're building. And that asset should appreciate in value. And the only way it's going to appreciate in value if it runs more without you, right? At the end of the day.
Perfect.
So
Yes,
the more it
all
runs
day.
without you, the more you're going to make, bottom line. And whether that's, 5 years from now or 20 years from now, like that's a great advice that you were saying. Like you gotta think with the end in mind, basically, right?
Mhm.
The top 10% of PT owners aren't just surviving, they're thriving. But what's their secret? Well, Neil Trickett's new Market to Grow book reveals how the top 10% of PT practices leverage marketing systems to simultaneously grow their new patients, attract top talent, and boost profit in their practice. You can learn from their secrets. Visit practicepromotions.net/book to claim your free copy of Market to Grow. Yes, you heard that right. We are shipping a free copy of Market to Grow to all podcast listeners who want it. Just visit practicepromotions.net/book to claim your free book. And now back to the show.
And so we deal with, especially in this business, right? In the business of physical therapy and rehabilitation, we deal with people. Like that's our primary driver. And so what have you learned along the way about managing staff at your practice?
Humility, right? Being able to say, I don't know, being able to say I was wrong, being able to um, take the blame for things, sometimes that aren't necessarily your fault. But in terms of managing staff, you've got to be at a point where you're not um, a dictatorship.
Hmm.
And there's times where you have to just have hard yeses and hard nos. But at the end of the day, it's about teams, right? And teams are managed differently than individuals. So my particular clinic team over here, I am going to manage in a particular way, whereas the individuals of that team, I know their nuances and I know I need to be a little more positive with this person or this other person. I can just give them the black and white answer to, right? And you've got to understand that between teams, between individuals, you've got to put on different hats. And it's not about you, it's about them. And that takes time. I think we as professionals, we as doctors of our, of our physical therapy profession, number one, number two, as owners, I think we have a sense of I know best. And over time, you'll find that doesn't work all the time. That doesn't work well, in my opinion, with managing people. It's about them, regardless of who you are, and you've got to take that accordingly. Second is, if you're structured well, and kind of coming back to knowing the business fundamentals, if your structure is good, you have standard operating procedures, you have your staff maps, or all of those systems in place, you've got to let them do their job. If you start to micromanage, you start to undermine the integrity of the leaders that you've put in place. They start to feel undervalued, and the people under them start to not see them as leaders because you're not letting them do their job. And at the same time, letting them make mistakes is a part of that process. And you've got to be okay with letting people make mistakes. You just need to fix them and give them the tools to get them fixed, right? So,
Right. Yeah.
that you just can't let them run rampant with that. But you can't, again, like, manage them to the point where they've got a gate belt on all the time, right? At some point, you got to take the belt off, and maybe there's a risk of fall, and you got to weigh the cost and balance, cost benefit of all that. So
Awesome. And so what have you used to implement in your practice, like resources that you've used to help you, do those things?
yeah, I can dial that down to 5 things day after day. It is, we've all in here in any leadership position have read Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. Just going after the general process of owning our decisions. It also goes into leadership delegation and those types of things. So, big, big time influence there. Good to Great by Jim Collins was a big one for me in seeing how to take even our little practice, but put into place concepts to, not great in the sense of being 50 clinics big and taking over the country, but great in terms of sustaining our practice. We've been around for 25 years, and I intend to be around for another 25, whether we're 4 clinics or 10 clinics. It's about longevity and giving folks a place that they can have a career, and then the people coming up under them can also have their careers. So that's been a big
Mhm.
one. Traction by Gino Wickman, systems upon systems upon systems. It was just, I don't say that we follow it rigidly, but it did give us a framework. Who by Jeff Smart for hiring. And then the biggest one, honestly, in all of our 20 something years, as of last year when we joined it, the peer-to-peer networking group through the APTA, which ultimately got me to practice promotions as well. So credit to them for that. But the peer-to-peer networking group has been just company changing, life changing. Like, it was a big deal. And we have a group of 5 of us, and I'll give hats off to all of them any day of the week for what we've done this past year.
I love that. Yeah, and I've talked to a variety of different practice owners that are part of that peer-to-peer network in the APT, and I think it's a wonderful resource because sometimes it can be lonely at the top, right? And you can't have conversations necessarily with your team that you can have with another practice owner and bounce things off of them, and they're going through something similar and they figured something out on their end, and you've got something that you did right that you can share with them. So I think that's a amazing resource, and if you are part of the APTA and the private practice section, like, definitely check that out. Definitely go see about joining the peer-to-peer network, because I think you're a great testimony into that, of how well it can work when you're able to learn from other practice owners.
For sure.
And so, Adam, as you obviously have a lot of responsibility across 4 different clinic locations, and you also operate off of Torque Sports Performance there. So how do you manage, in your day to day, your week to week, your different locations, and what kind of metrics and things do you like to look at?
Yeah. So Great timing because we just got back from a week-long cruise, my family and I, on spring break, and I was able to leave and had zero stress. I can honestly say it's the least stressed I've ever been in the history of being, working individual. So thank you to my team if anybody's listening when they're listening, first and foremost. But it took some time to get there. What Boiling it down now, we have our clinic teams at each location, and then we have teams across for all of our different facets, right? Billing, office, and that sort of thing. So we have a scorecard that is put out weekly and contributed to weekly by our teams so that everybody knows on a week to week basis where they stand and where everybody else stands. And I think that's a powerful tool, both for motivation and making sure nobody wants to be at the bottom of the totem pole, right? I think if you're a professional here, that's the mindset that we strive for. So I think it's good, and that's that capacity. The scorecard metrics are tied to their KPIs, so their key performance indicators, which are then tied to incentivization, right? So there's a purpose to everything that they're tracking, not just do it because I told you so. It's like, I need to track this because ultimately that determines whether I'm going to hit my bonus this month or quarter or whatever it is, right? So we've tried to make everything very purposeful. We have a clinic manager at each location. They track visits per day, cancel no-show rates. We have a marketing individual. They track evaluations scheduled and then some sub-tracking of new patients and returning patients. Our billing department tracks revenue per visit. Our office manager tracks collection percentage. And then myself for now, just because of where we are in the system, I track billed units per visit. But we'll switch that over to the clinicians here soon once the reporting gets up to speed. But having said that, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 things that we track every single week that I can tell you, based on those, the health of our company at a snapshot in a week. And if it's not happening, we will act on it immediately.
Yeah, that's awesome. So things happen, right? Things happen all the time in business. But if you have the numbers and you have those metrics and you're keeping close on it and your team's keeping close on it, you can make decisions to fix those things, right? And adjust for those things. So I really like the way that you broke that down. And I'm just curious from the scorecard perspective, do you have some like manual components where people have to fill it out, or is it more automated? What do you typically do there in your practice?
So both. So our clinicians are responsible for tracking the visits. So we have reports that'll do all of this easily, but I like folks to be invested, right? Invested in what they're doing. And it's nice for them to have to count them because then I know that they know them. So there's never a surprise if we have any issues, right? So there's that part. The clinicians take care of their visits, their evals, and their true hours worked. So I want them to be I want the metrics to be true. So I want to make sure if we took an hour off for a meeting here or we had a marketing thing to go to, like we're taking that out of the equation. And I put that on the clinician, like you need to be able to do this. That's tracking your productivity. And then my managers cross-reference their numbers with the reports, and then all that gets input into the scorecard. So it's manual, but we're talking 5 to 10 minutes extra per week of manual, but it's enough manual that I know they have to know their stuff.
Yep. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I learned that a while back in terms of it. You can have a lot of automated metrics in today's world, right? Our systems, our EMR systems and stuff can produce a lot of that things, and you can use that to some extent. But in order to build that accountability with your team, there's something about manually putting the numbers in, and that you're responsible for those numbers. It creates more ownership, more accountability. So our team does that too. We have we have data, we have systems to get us information, but at the same time, they put in a Google sheet just because it is manual, the metrics for us, that are important, and same thing for your practice. I love the way that you're doing that. That makes total sense. And for our listeners out there, if you are doing more metrics and having managers, directors operating off of metrics, do you have enough manual input of that data so that it creates that accountability with your team? So that's great advice there, Adam.
Yes. Yeah. That psychological effect is powerful. So
yeah, absolutely. And so as you've worked through Atlas, obviously we all make mistakes as we go through. That's part of being an entrepreneur, right? But what would you say is what has been your biggest mistake, and what did you learn from that?
overpromising and under-delivering by opening my mouth too fast. And I have a great idea. I have a great idea that's potentially going to positively impact my employees or this or that or whatever. And I can't wait to tell people. And you tell them and they get all excited. And then you actually run the numbers or you run the logistics or you pull the reports and you go, well, crap, that's not going to work. And then you got to backtrack.
Yeah.
And we can talk about that to a big degree when it comes to like incentivization over the course of a quarter or a year, or it can be little things like a little switch in systems. And I've learned to keep my mouth shut until I've done my due diligence and run the reports and maybe run it by one or two close to me. In fact, we have a leadership team now that that's where I get it out of my system with. They know we're going to scour this thing top to bottom, left to right before we release it to everybody else. So, hands down,
awesome.
That's been my biggest thing. That's what I've had to learn from.
Fantastic. And I'm glad to feel that I'm not alone, because exactly the same way. And I think that's probably just, I'm sure a lot of our practice owners are chuckling out there, because we've probably all done that to some degree, where we're the idea people, right? We're just, we're driving the vision of the clinic forward, the business forward, and we have these great ideas, and then, let's go for it. And then we don't really get the feedback from the team if that's even doable, or then we realize after the fact, like, hey, that was a good idea, but maybe it's not financially viable. So that's definitely a mistake that I've made too in business, is having the ideas and the team saying, well, at least my leadership team now is good. They kind of rein me back in a little bit.
That's been a big thing for us, is having that team there that I can spit out any idea, as crazy as it may be, and they will be the first to shut it down. And to the flip of that, then okay, they're also going to scour. They're going to play devil's advocate till there's nothing left to ask about it. So it's been good.
Awesome. And so you've been at Atlas now for 24 years. And so what would you say is a comparison of how Atlas did, marketing back in the 2000s, and then what would the comparison be to how you market the practice now throughout the decades?
Yeah. So it used to be, we had a part-time athletic trainer, part-time, and then the other half of it, she was part-time marketing, right? And she would do lunches, and she would go to the doctor's offices and drop off whatever, take your pick, notepads or pens or whatever it is, right? And we did that, goodness, till probably 2008, 9, 10, somewhere in that range. And then she moved on. My wife, actually, who I met through Atlas and everything too. So that's a whole nother connection to this wild, crazy web. But she's a PTA. She took over marketing. And so it was kind of half and half. And eventually she did full-time marketing. And I would say for the most part, same framework. The lunches, the meeting folks, going out and dropping stuff off, maintaining communications. But you were vastly communicating with decision makers, in the sense of the lady you talked with was the lady writing the scripts, right? The lady you talked with was the one who was the physician's, right-hand person. So there wasn't a lot of red tape. You kind of knew who you were talking to, and you knew you were going to get the referral. Transition to now, you are talking to somebody who has no touch feeling on who's getting referred where. That's done by some central office in another state, or the person at the front desk is 4 positions removed from the person making the decision. So marketing now, for us, we still have a physician liaison for that boots on the ground presence, which I think is still key. They're keeping us alive, so to speak, with regards to just saturation of our name, saturation of our likeness and our brand. And we make a lot more relationships with people behind the scenes, which is why it's so essential to have a really good people person, right? Rather than just the person we're walking into the front door with. So we still have that. But the biggest change is, and thanks to Practice Promotions, is the fact that our SEO presence, our Google Ads presence, our electronic presence for direct to consumer marketing is, whatever it is now is 1,000,000% more than it was 7 years ago, just because of the market. So that's the biggest change in that capacity. Direct to consumer, direct to employer, cutting out a lot of these middle people that have no say in the game anymore, and trying to navigate that landscape.
Yeah, that's great. Great feedback there. Great understanding the landscape, as you say. And the game has changed, right? To some degree, where we used to be very heavy physician networking and referrals. And especially since COVID, like things were getting changed before that, but then COVID kind of accelerated a lot of stuff with that direct to consumer. And the public is more used to like looking around first rather than going off of just a network or a physician referral. So if you're not in front of them online and getting your name in front of them, then yeah, they're going to choose somebody else. So, but I do support what you're saying in terms of there's part of the business that is still about the physician relationships and the networking there. And as you mentioned, the people behind the scenes, right? So the people that actually make a lot of the decisions where people go for care, your referral coordinators and your nurses and your MAs and things like that. So I do believe in that, and that's an important part of your marketing where you need to make sure that you still have those business relationships. But again, if you can supplement that more so today with that direct-to-consumer marketing, you can actually build those relationships more on the back end because you have the opportunity to refer out, right, to different physician groups when needed. Yep. So I think there's opportunities.
Yeah, especially with our sports performance program, that's been a big. We kind of knew it was going to be a benefit, but it's lived up to its namesake, right? Like I have a constant flow of direct to consumer clients who sprain ankles and strain rotator cuffs all the time. And what do I do with them? I send them to physicians, and I make sure to spread that out based on, specialty or whatever it may be. So we're not locked into just one or two referral sources. But the fun thing now is that the physicians hate the communication process just as much as we do in terms of having to go through multiple lines, right? I text back and forth with more clinicians or more physicians now than I did, 5 years ago. And I would say the majority of these referral sources back and forth are the physician texting me or me texting them because neither one of us want to deal with the 14 steps in between. And then we have these liaisons now who kind of take care. It's funny, they have liaisons who are like their own office people to bypass the office people because the office is a pain. So that's where I talk about our liaison being a boots on the ground connection to those people, because you don't know those people coming in the front door, dropping off pens and paper. Like it takes some magic to get to those. And that's a great opportunity. And I think some folks see this as a challenging landscape in a negative way, but I think it's exciting because if you can be the person at the top of that physician's cell phone list for all of their PT needs because you're responsive, get right back to them, get the person in right away and do all the things that they need, boom, you're good to go. I guarantee you they're going to send everybody to you and then obviously provide great care on top of that. So
that's fantastic. I love that. And what a way to kind of look at kind of outside the box a little bit more, right? With incorporating that sports performance and then how that's blossomed and exploded and allow you to have opportunities to, refer back to physicians. And I commend you on what you've been able to build there with that. That's so as far as the sports performance, is it kind of athletes of all ages that you're working with to enhance their sports capabilities? And then, or do they come to you also when they're particularly, maybe had an ankle sprain or an injury and then they're trying to rehab from that injury?
Yeah, so Torque was created out of a need with patients coming to Atlas. At the time, it was a lot of baseball, but it happened to be kids coming in injured, finishing rehab, and then having nowhere to go train properly, I guess you would say, right? True sports performance rather than just going to the gym or somebody who's just trying to make them tired in 30 minutes or whatever it may be, right? So we were like,
Yeah.
well, we'll take care of the training. We're strength and conditioning specialists on top of our PT and athletic training degrees and all of that. And then that just grew. And so we have a separate sports performance facility that is geared towards, yes, all ages. Age isn't so much a factor as it is training competency. Um,
Mhm.
Everybody is individually assessed. There's no option. You're coming in, you're getting an individual assessment, you are getting your own individualized programming. And that programming is based off fundamental scientific strength and conditioning principles. So we have 13-year-olds with an individual program, but they're holding a dumbbell, squatting to a box, learning basic movement patterns, right? And then we have
Mhm.
quarterbacks who are prepping for the NFL Combine, who are going through outsourcing of movement analysis. We have full top to bottom 5 days a week, 4 hours a day worth of training, nutritionist on board, and all of that stuff, and then everything in between.
Fantastic. Love it. Love it. And so, as we've worked together over the years here, I'm just curious, what has your overall experience been with practice promotions?
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, I will say everything that was discussed in coming on board has been met or exceeded. And I don't say that lightly because you can talk to Samantha, who onboarded me. I asked her question after question on numerous occasions and spent excessive amounts of time because I knew enough, I think, to be dangerous in terms of what I was looking for. And I wanted to make sure we had been through a relationship with a marketing firm in the past that didn't give us the results. So I kind of learned a lot from that as well. So I came on board with a lot of questions and a lot of, can you do this? You all said yes. And like I said, the things were met or exceeded. The timelines were exceeded. Our return on investment with regards to like our website SEO presence and Google Ads stuff was fantastic. And then if it's not a testimonial, I don't know what it is. I decided to bring in my, Torque Sports Performance as well onto the practice promotions platform. So I was willing to invest that there. And being that that's a much smaller company, that's a much bigger undertaking, but I have faith in the results. And looking forward to many years together.
That's awesome. Thanks for that feedback there, Adam. I appreciate that. And
Mm-hmm.
so, just kind of wrapping up here, what would you say is that number one mindset shift that you wish that every PT owner could make out there?
Yeah. So the biggest one for me, and a lot of this has come over the past year, is as owners, we need to stop trying to tell people what they need. Whether it be patients, whether it be physicians, employees to some degree, I would say, clients, stop telling them what they need. Shut your mouth, listen to what they are telling you they need, and then within the guardrails of your company's mission and your company's values, start to formulate solutions to their problems, right? Um, whether it be the social media presence of a lot of folks out there, whether it be, um, listening to other owners talk about or being frustrated that the physician's not sending them all of their patients because they're the best in town. I'm like, you're not speaking to their needs. You're telling them what you think they want to hear, and you're so great and you do this and you do that. They don't care. They may only care that your hours are 7 to 7, and they couldn't care less that you know, do XYZ modalities. Like, listen to what they need. And then like I said, within the guardrails of your company's mission and values, start to formulate solutions to them or for them.
Fantastic. Awesome. Great advice there, Adam. Thank you so much. for being on the podcast with us today and helping us understand your fantastic journey from being an intern now to the owner and operator of two successful businesses there. So congratulations on that. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of Atlas PT and Torque Sports Performance success into the future. And so for
Thanks,
all
Neil.
our listeners,
I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. And so for all our listeners out there, thank you for being on the podcast here today. Don't forget to subscribe to us. Also go on our YouTube channel and subscribe there. We got lots of great tips and advice for you on that. And at practicepromotions.net, tons of resources and downloads for you on that. So this is Neil Triggett from the Practice Marketing Podcast and Practice Promotions. And thank you for being with us on the call today and wishing you much success in your practice.
A free way for you to support our show is by leaving a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. It's a chance for you to tell us what you love about the show, and it helps others discover it as well. Just scroll down to ratings and review on your phone and click write a review. Thanks.